friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today we're going to be discussing how we can actually implement API versioning inside our web API. We're going to be going through the introduction to it inside our program.cs, how we can add it to our controller, how we can implement versioning for multiple controllers and even on an action level. And then we're going to be seeing how we can deprecate certain APIs versions by just adding a few tags here and there. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. It will really help the channel. As well, if you'd like to support me, please consider supporting me on Patreon or buying me a coffee. Now, grab your cup of coffee and let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we need to check our version of .NET to make sure everything is installed correctly. I'm going to put .NET -- version. And as you can see here, I'm running on the latest version by the time of recording, 7.0.202. Now I need to create my application and we're going to be using the .NET new web API. I'm gonna give it a name. I'm gonna call it API versioning app, and now we can see it's created successfully. Now let me go to this application, cd API versioning app, and I'm just gonna open it in Visual Studio Code. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to open my terminal. And inside my terminal, all I'm going to be doing is .NET build, just to make sure that my application is building successfully. Perfect. Once I have done that, the next step is I need to install some packages. And these packages are going to basically allow me to implement API versioning inside my application. So the first package that I'm going to add is .NET. See how this is looking. Okay, let's clear it up. And let's make it a bit higher. Okay, so the first one's going to be .NET add package Microsoft.ASP.NET core.mvc.versioning. We can see it's downloading. Okay, perfect. Now it's been installed. The next one is going to be .NET add. Okay, let's clear it up so it will be more visible. Again, .NET add package. It's going to be Microsoft.ASP.NET core.mvc.versioning.API Explorer. Okay, perfect. So now that we have installed our two packages, let's make sure that they are actually inside our CS Proj. And if we go to API versioning.cs Proj, we can see that both of them has been installed successfully and both of them are on version 5. Okay, great. Again, let's do .NET build just to make sure that everything is still working. Okay, great. So now that we have done that, the next step that we need to do is we need to update our program.cs. Since we're going to be utilizing API versioning inside our application, we need to inject it into our DI container. We want to basically allow our application to recognize there's going to be different version of the APIs. And in order for us to do that, what we need to do is we need to update program.cs, inject it in the build process, and then basically configure it from there. So let's see how that's going to work. So if we go here to program.cs, and before our app builds, so here we're going to add some more configuration. We're going to put builder.services.add API versioning, and then here I'm going to provide the options that I want. Let's add a semicolon here. Perfect. And then now I want to basically provide my options that I need. The first one is going to be options.assume default version if unspecified. So assume default version if unspecified. So let's say someone is doing a call on our API and they did not specify a version. That way we're going to be basically providing them with the default version of it, and we're going to say it's going to be true. So rather than facing an error because since they did not specify a default version, we're going to be giving that request default version that exists. The second option that we want is default API version, and here we're going to provide it what version do we want, and we're going to say new API version, and here I'm just going to give it 1, actually without the quotes, 1 and 0, So that's for now, this is going to be the default version. And then basically the third option that I want is going to be report API version. So basically here, whenever the user is doing any calls to our API, they're going to be able to see the different versions that are available for this API endpoint. And they're going to be able to see like it is API version 2, version 1, 1.1, so on and so forth. And here I'm going to say it's going to be equal to true. Then I'm going to put options dot API version reader, and here we're going to be specifying what type, how I'm going to be able to read that API version that the user is sending. Do I want to enable it through the header? Do I want to enable through a query string? Do I want to enable it through a custom options? So all of that I can specify it here. I can do a combination of different input that I can. I'm just going to right now showcase the 3 different available ones, but then later on we're only going to be utilizing the header one. So for now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put new, actually I'm going to put API version reader. Let's fix those references. And here all we need to do is just put combine, because we're going to specify multiple ways where we can actually read the version of it. And as we can see here that we have a list of input that we can provide. So the first one is going to be new query string API versioning reader, and we need to specify what is the query string. For now we're just going to put API-version, the simplest one. Another one is going to be new header API version reader, and here we can say put, for example, x-version. And lastly, we can put a new media type API access version, and here I can just say version. And then now once that is done, we can close it. So here basically, if we do a quick summary of what we have done, we just basically added API service, API versioning into our services. We basically told it that it needs to assume the default version when it's unspecified. Then we told it that if case a request comes in without any specific version, it needs to assume the default version. And here, no, this one here, we told it that it needs to assume the default version. Then here we specified what is the default version of our application. We allowed our API to return the different versions which are available. And these are the options that we're going to be allowing the users to send to our API in order for them to set up their own version of the API that they want to utilize. So once we have done that, the next step is we need to actually add more information. So builders dot services dot versioning, actually add versioning API explorer, and add some options. Let's close this. And the first option is going to be the group format of how are we going to format the group version that we have. And here all we're going to say is going to be lowercase v and then 3 uppercase v's. That's going to be the first one. And then second, we're going to put the substitute API version in URL equal true. So here, for example, what we're doing with the group format is basically we are specifying the group format that the version needs to adhere to. And then the second one for a substitute API version in the URL. So in case there is an API version in the URL which we are passing, we are substituting it because the API version we're going to be able to read. So these are the main thing. Again, .NET build. Perfect. Now our application is running. Let us just right now do a quick .NET run. And let's open this. /swagger /index.html, and let's zoom in a bit. And right now, if we look at this, our application here is directly automatically requested us that we need to specify either our API version or the header version here. So this is going to be through the query string, and this is going to be through the header. And for example, right now for the default controller that currently exists, we can see that we have weather controller, and we're also going to be doing a GET request. So right now, if I execute without anything, we are basically able to get the response back, because what we did here is we basically allowed this. But let's see if I stop this. So let's stop our application and let's run it again. And here we can see the application has run again. Let's go back to our web browser. Let's refresh this. And let's come back here. And now we can see that we got the required, because basically what we need to do is we need to specify what is the API version that we need. Other than that, if we click on try it and click on execute, it's not going to be able to execute because we're not substituting the default API version here. So if I put here version, let's say 2, which as we said, the default version is going to be 1, this is not going to work. We're not going to get that this version does not exist. And basically we can see the default version that's provided back from the URL is going to be version 1.0. So once we have done that, now let's try the actually correct version, which is going to be 1. Click on execute. Again, we did not receive it. But if I click 1.0, execute, we're able to get the actual response back. So that's going to be the first type of API versioning that we have. Here, basically what we did is we have forced the user to actually input their API version before they are able actually to communicate with our API. So right now, if I go back here, and let me stop this. So inside here, I'm just going to enable this back. And I'm gonna get rid of these different ones. So currently we don't really need the version 1, and I'm just only gonna be utilizing the header one. Perfect. Again, .NET build, just to make sure everything is running as it should be. Perfect. So now that we have done that, the next step is we want to see how we can actually attach an API version to our controller or to our action. Because currently right now what we're doing is for our entire application, because we did not specify any types of controllers, API version for our controllers, is going to implement it across all. But let's say now we have version 1, version 2 for our application. Let's see how we can implement those. So first of all, we're going to be doing is we're going to just make it as a version for a single controller, so you can see how the syntax will work from there, and then we're going to be expanding on that. So now if I go to my controllers folder, weather controller, so here for example this is a very simple controller, and this is basically bootstrap whenever I created my application, and we can see it has the API controller attribute, the route attribute, and it's inheriting from controller base, and basically we only have one action, which is a GET request. So right now if I want to add versioning to this, it's going to be quite simple. I'm going to utilizing the attributes. If you're not familiar with attributes and filter, I have a different video which goes into much more details about this. I'm going to be linking it here somewhere where you can actually go watch it. So right now all I'm going to be doing here is just add API version. I'm going to put 1.0. So now if I run this application again, now we can see application is running. Let's go back to my web browser and I'm gonna refresh this. We can see here that I only have one type of API versioning that I'm sending. And right now I'm gonna try to execute it without. And we can see we're able to get the response because basically we have informed it that we are allowed to execute it without any specific API version. I'm just gonna put now version 1, execute, we're able to get it. So now that's mean that our API version is actually running. And if I go back to my response, we can see here that this is the API version supported. And here I can see that this is the version that we need. So right now, if I try to put 2 and execute, we're not gonna get, because basically first we can see that from the response type, we can see that this is not supporting version 2. And if we wanna tell the client what types of version they are supported, we can see here that this is the version that they need to support. Perfect. So once we add more version types, so for example we have another controller for with the same name but with a different version, we're going to be able to see that we can support actually 2 versions simultaneously. Let's say we want to implement a new feature, and this new feature is only going to be available for certain beta customers. and we don't want to mess out with the current infrastructure, so we can introduce a new controller with the same name, with the same everything, but with a different version. And then that way, whenever a customer or a user wants to target the new one, all they need to do is update that version, rather than basically try to change their code to target a brand new controller and so on and so forth. So that's why it makes it easier for us. So right now, let me go back to Visual Studio Code. Just let me close this. Okay, perfect. So now let me stop this here. And now we're going to be able to see how we can actually update our route to include the version that we have, and how we can actually update this in order for it to have a much more versioning specifically around the actions. So first things first, I want to update the route. So instead of having it directly as a controller, I want to make it as API /v, and then I want to specify my versions, and he's going to be equal to version API version. And then once I have done that, I'm just going to leave the rest as is. And here we can see that I have specified here the default API version. And then once I come here, what I'm going to do is just .NET run, go back to my web browser, and inside my web browser I'm going to refresh, and now we're going to see something different. The URL now shifted. It was the first version, it was / weather forecast, but now we have / API and then version. If I click on this, now you can see that the version is directly enabled inside my endpoint. So if I click right out, let's say I put version 2, which is not supported, and I click on execute, we can see we got an error and we see what is the supported version. But if I put 1, execute, we're able to get the response back, and we're able to get, if I click here, I can see, where is it? The response header, we are able to see that we are able to get version 1 as well. Perfect. So next step is we're gonna be readjusting this so we can have version 1 and version 2 of the same controller. So inside my controllers folder, I'm gonna be creating a new folder. I'm gonna call it v1. And then I'm gonna create another controller, another folder, sorry. I'm gonna call it v2. And I'm gonna copy this, put it inside v1. Yes, I wanna move it. And what I wanna do is I wanna update this. So I'm gonna put here .v1. So this is gonna be where my first controller is gonna exist. I'm gonna stop this. And yeah, that should be fine. Let's just do another build. Everything is building successfully. So what I want to do is I'm just gonna copy this and paste it here. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna change, first of all, my API version is to version 2. And I'm just gonna do another .NET build. Oh, sorry, we need to update this v1 to v2 because it's in a different directory. And now I'm gonna do .NET build. Perfect, now I have the same controller name, but 2 different versions. Now I have version 1 here and I have version 2 here. So what I'm gonna do as well, inside version 2, I'm just gonna change some of the summary here. So the summary, instead of being generated like this, what I'm gonna be doing for the summary is I'm gonna make it manual. Let's say the weather is nice and cool, let's say as a summer breeze, something like that. And for the version 1, I'm just gonna make sure that stay similar that it is by utilizing the summary and creating a random one. So now let's do a .NET build. Make sure everything is building, perfect, .NET run. My application is running. Let me go back to my browser and let me refresh. So now if I come here, we can see that I did not get 2 controllers. Although here, I have 2 controllers, weather forecast and weather forecast. And every single one of them is a unique different folder. But because they share the same name, and the only thing which is different is the version, my Swagger file basically said, okay, this is the same thing, but there's different versions, so this is not gonna create 2 of them. So now let's see, if I click on version 1 here and execute, I should be able to receive the same summary as I always do, which is gonna be a single word. But If I come here and update this to version 2 and execute, we can see here that I got the answers based on version 2, which is the weather here is nice and cool. And the nice thing about this, if we go all the way down, we can see now the API supported version is now basically reported as version 1 and version 2. So now this customer can be able to see, or basically this user will be able to target version 1 and version 2. And this is really important, specifically if I'm going to introduce new features, if I want, for example, to update my controllers, if for example I want to deprecate certain aspect of my controller, that will give me the power to do so, because basically having the different version available of my API, it will make sure that my clients actually understand what types of version they want to target, know them, they will be able to know exactly which one of them that they need to actually request in order for them to get either the latest version or the most stable version. So once we have done that, the next step for us is going to be continuing updating our code. So let's go back here, let's stop this. So now let's say inside my version 2, I want to introduce a version 2.1, or inside my version 1. And here, for example, what I want to do is I want to have, for example, the same get, but I want to have another different, so for version 2, I want to have this one, but for version, let's say I'm going to put here, this is version 2, but for example, I want to introduce another get, and I want it only to be available with version 2.1. So how can I do that? I'm just going to put here version 2.0. Here I'm just going to put 2.1, actually 2.1, so it reflects to version 2.1, and here I'm just going to put 2.1. So how can I do that? Here we can see that both of them, we have two different methods, but this is going to be a key role here is by the API version. So here what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to add another API version, and here I'm going to put version 2.1. So now I have version 2 and version 2.1, which is basically going to adhere for this controller. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to separate my actions to only target certain versions. So what I'm going to be doing here is for version, for the first one, I'm just going to make it sure it's enabled for version 2.0. So I'm going to put API, actually it's going to be more of map to API version, and here I'm going to specify it's going to be able to version 2.0, and then I'm going to copy this, go down here, put this here, I'm just going to map this to version 2.1, and now if I click on .NET Run, we can see it's building successfully. And now if I go here and refresh, oh, let's do another change before we do that. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to put, this is going to be version 2.1, and the weather is, let's say, hot in the summer, something like that. So let's run it. The application is running. If I come back here, I refresh, and now let's see what's happening here. So if I click on try it out, and version 1 of my application, we're able to see the old one that we currently see always. If I do a version 2, we should be seeing as a summer breeze with a version 2 perfectly. But if I put version 2.1 and I click on execute, we are able to see that we have the third one, which is going to be the weather is hot on the summer breeze version 2.1. So we can see here that even inside a single controller, we are able even to dissect that for different version. The same action can go into different aspects. So the same action, we were able to differentiate it to two different versions within the same controller. And here you can see the power of versioning and how you can actually implement a new feature as you currently maintain the current stable one for all of your customers. And this is really, really important. So now once we have done this, let's go back, stop this, and the last thing that we're going to be doing is we're just going to do a full quick test on this. So I'm going to go back here, and I want to introduce something here which is going to be the deprecated mode. And the deprecated mode here basically means that I want to force my customers to utilize version 2 of my application rather than utilizing version 1. And this way, whenever they try to call version 1, they will be able still to get the result, but they will get a deprecated notice inside the response headers, so they will know that this version is not going to be supported for longer. So it's highly advisable, so they need to move to the new version. And in order for me to do the deprecated mode, all I need to do here is just put deprecated equal true. And now if I run this, and we go back to my Firefox here, and let's refresh, utilize the same one, try it out, put version 1, execute. If we go back all the way down, we can see that this is the deprecated version, version 1.0, and the supported version is going to be version 2.1. And here we can see that we are able to offer our clients a better version management of our APIs, and basically they will be able to see which current version is supported and which one is going to be basically deprecated soon or going to be removed soon. So in this video, basically what we have done right now, if we have basically covered how we can actually implement API versioning inside our application, how we can actually implement two different types of version for the same controller, how we can specify versions for the single actions or multiple actions, and how we can implement deprecation. And this video basically will allow you to basically handle all your API better, handle your API management better, make sure your customer is aware of all of the changes that's been introduced to your APIs and any basically deprecation that's going to be available for your API. I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share and subscribe if you like this video. It will really help the channel. Have a great day.